Marked by the Alpha by Aster Quinn. Narrated by BookZoro. Before we start, let us know in the comments where you're listening from and what kind of stories you enjoy most. We love hearing from our listeners. Chapter 1. The Night of the Ceremony. The fire knew something I didn't. It burned too bright at the center of the clearing, licking the dark sky with tongues of copper and gold, and every time I looked at it my chest tightened with a feeling I couldn't name. Standing at the edge of 𝑷𝒍𝒂𝒚𝒍𝒊𝒔𝒕 ceremonial circle, I told myself it was just nerves. I was good at lying to myself. Stop fidgeting. My sister Mara pressed her elbow into my ribs, her dark eyes catching the firelight. She was 2 years older and infinitely more poised, an omega like me, but one who had learned to wear it like armor rather than a wound. Her mate Dom stood behind her, his big hands resting on her shoulders like anchors. "You look like you're about to bolt." "I'm not fidgeting," I said, fidgeting. Around us, the ironwood pack gathered in the old way. No phones, no shoes, the grass cold and damp beneath our bare feet. Every wolf in Ashvale attended the ceremony of fates. It happened once a year, on the autumn equinox, when the veil between instinct and destiny grew thin. Elder Reuben, white-haired and gnarled as old timber, would call the unmated wolves forward one by one, and the moon would speak through the blood. I had attended 4 ceremonies and felt nothing each time. I had stopped hoping 2 years ago. The drums began, low and resonant, shaking the air in my lungs. Pack members swayed slightly, unconsciously, responding to the rhythm the way wolves always respond, with their whole bodies, their whole selves. Even I felt it pulling at something deep and animal in my chest. Reuben raised his hands. "Children of the moon, tonight we offer ourselves to truth," the line formed. I hung back, watching others step forward first. I watched young Henrik, 17 and shaking with excitement, press his forehead to Reuben's palm and gasp when the elder's eyes went white. I watched the bond light up between him and a girl across the circle, both of them crying before they even reached each other. I watched and felt the familiar hollow ache of wondering whether someone like me, an omega, lowest rank, quiet and overlooked and never quite enough, was meant to feel any of that. Alara. Mara nudged me. My turn. I stepped forward on legs that felt made of water. The fire popped and sent sparks skyward. Reuben's eyes found mine, and he smiled, patient, judgment-free, and I gave him my hands. For a long moment, nothing. The drums faded. The night held its breath. Then something cracked open inside my sternum. It was not subtle, not a whisper or warmth or a gentle suggestion. It was a thunderclap behind my ribs, a pulling sensation so violent I nearly fell forward, my whole body lurching toward something, someone, a direction my body knew before my mind did. Reuben's eyes flew open. I followed the pull like a compass follows north. Cale Stormwood stood at the edge of the gathering where he always stood, slightly apart, slightly above, watching his pack the way a general watches a battlefield. 26 years old, and already the most powerful alpha ironwood had produced in a generation. Broad-shouldered, dark-eyed, jaw carved from something that didn't know how to be soft. He was looking at me. I watched the exact moment it hit him, the fractional widening of his eyes, the slight tension in his jaw, and I thought, in one soaring, terrified heartbeat, him, it's him. Then his expression closed, shut like a door, like a gate, like every wall going up at once. He looked away. He looked away and did not look back, and the murmuring in the crowd swelled, and Mara was pressing her hand over her mouth, and I was standing there with my heart hammering against my ribs like something trying to escape. Reuben released my hands. His eyes were kind and cautious. "Child, do you feel a pull?" "Yes," I whispered. He nodded slowly, and his expression, just for a moment, held something heavier than ceremony, something that looked almost like guilt. I didn't have time to examine it, because Cale Stormwood, alpha of the Ironwood pack, turned and walked back through the crowd toward the pack house without a word. He didn't run. He didn't hurry. He walked like a man who had made a decision and was already finished with it. He left me standing at the bonfire in front of everyone I had ever known. That should have been the worst of it. It wasn't. Chapter 2: The Rejection. He summoned me the next morning. A pack member knocked on Mara's door at sunrise. I hadn't slept. I'd lain in the dark with the ache of the bond pressing at the inside of my ribs like a second heartbeat, and stared at the ceiling and told myself every hour that maybe I was wrong. Maybe the pull had a different source. Maybe I'd misread it in the shock of the moment. I knew I was lying. Omegas don't misread the calling. I dressed carefully. I don't know why I bothered, as if the right shirt could change what was about to happen. Mara stood in the bedroom doorway with the look she got when she didn't know how to help, but needed to do something. Dom made coffee without being asked and set it in front of me, and I drank it standing because I was afraid if I sat, I wouldn't be able to make myself stand again. "You don't have to go," Mara said. "Yes, I do. Alara, he's the alpha." I set down my mug. I go. The pack house was 10 minutes through early morning Ashvale. The town was beautiful in autumn, red and gold bleeding through the trees, mountains blue in the distance, the air cold and clean. I had always loved this walk. That morning I barely saw it. The pack house was old and massive and smelled of pine and wood smoke and the specific, powerful scent of alpha that every wolf learns to recognize before they learn anything else. Corin, Cale's second, let me in without expression and led me to his office. Cale was standing behind his desk. He didn't sit. He didn't invite me to sit. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back and his dark eyes on me, and his expression perfectly, completely blank. "Close the door," he said. I closed it. The silence stretched for 10 seconds that felt like 10 years. I could feel the pull of the bond, even in this cold, formal room, even with his walls so high I could feel them physically. My wolf wanted to close the distance between us. I held very still. "I want to address what occurred at the ceremony," he said. His voice was even, measured. The voice he used in pack meetings when announcing something already decided. It would be irresponsible to allow any misunderstanding to continue. "All right," I said. My voice came out steadier than I expected. The bond response is a biological reaction. It does not obligate either party. I know that. Then you understand when I tell you that I do not intend to pursue this bond. He met my eyes directly. That, at least, he gave me. He didn't look away when he said it. "You are an Omega. I am the alpha of this pack. A leadership mate must be capable of standing at my side in ways that require strength I have not seen evidence of in you. I mean no cruelty. I mean only clarity. I have not seen evidence of strength in you." The words landed like stones in still water, and the ripples spread outward, and I stood there and breathed through them. I thought about crying. I had the terrible urge to, and I hated myself for it. I thought about arguing. I thought about listing every quiet thing I had done for this pack for 21 years. I thought about begging. I did none of those things. "Thank you for your clarity," I said. My voice was still even. I was very proud of that. Something flickered across his face, so brief I might have imagined it. Then it was gone. "The bond will fade if it is not fed," he said. "In time. I understand." I moved to the door. "Is that all, Alpha?" A pause. "Ilara." I stopped but did not turn around. "I am sorry," he said quietly. For the difficulty of this, I opened the door, and I walked out of his office, and I walked out of the pack house, and I walked all the way back to Mara's without stopping. When I got there, I sat on the back steps, looking into the trees, and I breathed very carefully for a long time. Then I went inside, and I started packing. Chapter 3. Running. I was gone before midnight. Mara cried. She tried to talk me out of it, then held on to me in the doorway while Dom stood behind her, looking like a man who understood and wished he did not. "Tell me where you go," she said, against my hair. "I will contact you when I am settled." I pulled back and looked at her. "Do not look at me like that. I am fine. You are not fine." "No, but I will be." I took one bag, a change of clothes, my money, a folding knife, and a photograph of our mother. I left everything else. A life that fits in one bag is not much of a life, but that was a thought for later. Right now, I needed distance between myself and the Ironwood pack. I shifted at the tree line and ran. Running in wolf form is the closest thing I know to joy. Even that night, even with my chest split open and the bond throbbing like a severed nerve, the movement helped. The ground came up through my paws. The forest breathed around me, pine and cold water and distant deer, and I ran through it with my ears flat and my mind deliberately blank. I ran for 6 hours. Silver Creek was neutral territory, a wide valley between 3 pack borders where no single pack held claim. It had a small town, a traveler's hostel built for wolves in transition, and a reputation as a place where people asked few questions. I had never been there, but every wolf in the region knew of it. It was where you went when you were between things. I was very much between. I shifted back at the valley edge at dawn, pulled on my clothes with shaking hands, and walked the last mile into town. Silver Creek looked like a dozen other small mountain towns, a main street, a diner with fogged windows, a general store, but the scent of it was different. Layer upon layer of wolf signatures, no dominant alpha note, nothing that made my shoulders rise. Neutral, safe. The hostel was run by a human woman named Gil, who had been married to a wolf for 30 years and had long since stopped being surprised by anything. She gave me a room, a towel, and a pot of terrible coffee without a single question, and I sat on the edge of the narrow bed and looked at my own hands. I mean only clarity. I pressed the heels of my hands against my eyes. The bond ached. Of course it ached. It was going to ache for a while. A rejected mate bond does not disappear overnight. It dims over months, over distance, over stubborn refusal to feed it. I knew the biology. I had read about it the same way I read about everything that happens to other people that I never expected to happen to me. I showered. I ate. I sat in the diner and drank better coffee than Gil's and watched Silver Creek wake up. Nobody looked at me twice. Nobody knew my name. It was the most invisible I had felt in years, and for the first time all day, I breathed without it hurting. I was still sitting there when the door opened, and a man came in and took the stool beside me with the ease of someone at home in any room. Not alpha dominant, confident, settled. "You have got pack-run dust on your boots," he said, not looking at me. Then to the counterwoman, "The usual, Nessa." I looked at my boots. He was right. "I run," I said. "Long run." He glanced sideways. Brown eyes. Steady. A half-smile that was more observation than amusement. "Silver Creek does not have pack-run dust. Ironwood does." I looked back at my coffee. "I am aware. Damon Reyes," he said. "Beta of the Silver Creek Pack." A pause. "You have got the look of someone who is not going back." The observation was so accurate that for a moment I could not answer. "Then, Elara Voss." He nodded like I had confirmed something. "When you are ready, there is someone you should meet. Options." Such a small word for what I had spent my whole life being quietly denied. "All right," I said. "I will meet them." Chapter 4. Silver Creek. The Silver Creek Pack Alpha was a woman. I don't know what I had expected. Ironwood ran the old structures. Alpha male, female wolves in supporting roles. In 21 years I had never seen a female alpha. Her name was Sarah Cole. 50 years old, built like the mountains around us, gray threaded through dark hair. The lines on her face were earned rather than aged into. She shook my hand like she was shaking hands with an equal, and that single gesture was more disorienting than anything that had happened in the last 24 hours. We met in a pack house nothing like Ironwood's. Where Kale's was stone and old wood and perpetual formality, Sarah's was warm and slightly cluttered, smelling of coffee and wood smoke. A half-finished quilt on the back of a chair. Someone's muddy boots by the door. It felt lived in. It felt like a home. "Sit," she said. I sat. Damon leaned against the doorframe and said nothing. He had brought me here and was now simply present. "Damon says you're from Ironwood," Sarah said. "Yes, and you're not going back." "No." She studied me with clear, deep eyes. "Any particular reason, or is that your business?" "Both," I said. She nodded and accepted it without pressing. "You're an Omega by scent." "But I'd bet good money that's not everything you are. Damon doesn't bring in every lone wolf who wanders through." "I don't know what else I am," I said honestly. "I haven't had much opportunity to find out." Something shifted in Sarah's expression, a recognition that wasn't quite pity. More like the look of someone who knows the specific weight of a specific kind of limitation. "Silver Creek takes wolves in transition on a trial basis," she said. "You work, contribute, train with the pack. After 3 months, if it's a mutual fit, we discuss permanent membership. If not, you move on, and we help you find your next place. We don't poach from other packs, and we don't harbor wolves who've done wrong. Are either of those things relevant to you? No. Then you're welcome to try." She stood. The meeting was over. Efficient, unceremonious, and strangely respectful. "Training starts at 6. If you can't keep up, you'll know in a week. If you can, you'll know that too." She walked out. Simple as that. The pack quarters were in a long building behind the main house. Individual rooms, small but private. Mine smelled of cedar and cool air. A bed, a desk, a window facing east. Damon paused in the doorway. "Whatever happened in Ironwood, it matters here how you work, not where you're from. Sarah means that. So do I." I looked up at him. An honest face. Not particularly handsome, but entirely trustworthy. The kind of face you find yourself believing, without quite knowing why. "Why did you bring me in?" I asked. He considered this. "Because you ran 6 hours at pack pace and still walked into that diner like you owned the ground under your feet. That's not nothing." A small pause. And I know the look of someone who's been told what they're not, for so long they've started to believe it. I used to have that look too. He left before I could respond. I lay back on the narrow bed and stared at the ceiling and felt, very distantly and underneath all the pain and exhaustion, the faint beginning edge of something new. The bond with Cale was still there. It would be there for a long time, but bonds could be endured. I had been enduring things my whole life. I set my alarm for 5:30. I was going to want coffee. Chapter 5. Training begins. By the end of the first week, I was sore, in ways I hadn't known were possible. Pike, Silver Creek's head trainer and weapons master, was an enormous woman with a prosthetic hand who handled a blade with her remaining one better than most people managed with two. She watched me through the warm-up drills on day 1 and said nothing. On day 3, she corrected my footwork in 3 words. On day 5, she moved me into the intermediate training group. You know your body and trust your instincts. Building on a foundation is faster than starting from scratch. Nobody at Ironwood had ever said anything like that to me. In the intermediate group, I met Jess, my age, built like a fighter, with a laugh like a door slamming. She took one look at me on the first morning and said bluntly, "You fight like someone who learned to defend, not attack." "We'll fix that." Then she moved to the sparring circle and gestured for me to follow, and that was the beginning of a friendship I hadn't seen coming. Jess attacked the way she spoke, directly, without preamble, and in forcing me to respond to her, she made me faster. Within a week, I was anticipating her moves. Within 2 weeks, I was occasionally getting ahead of her, which delighted her enormously. "You're getting mean," she said approvingly one afternoon, after I knocked her back 3 steps. "Is that a compliment? In a training circle? Absolutely yes." Damon appeared at most evening sessions, not training himself, just present in his particular way that neither pushed nor withdrew. On Thursday, he brought me tea after a hard session and sat beside me on the low wall at the field's edge. "How are you doing?" he asked eventually. "Better than I expected." "The bond?" I glanced at him. "You know about that? You left an alpha's territory the night after a ceremony. It doesn't require a lot of inference." "It aches," I said. "Less each day." That was almost true. "What's the cure?" He was quiet for a moment. "Living," he said. "Building something so solid the old ache doesn't have room to expand." I thought about that long after he went inside. Sarah ran deep territory loops twice a week, full pack bond engagement, the kind of run that bound a pack together at something more fundamental than strategy. She included me in the 3rd week, which I hadn't expected. When I mentioned this to Damon, he shrugged. "She includes people she thinks belong here," and walked away before I could ask what that meant. On the first of those runs, something shifted. My wolf, which had always been quiet, which I had always assumed was simply my nature, responded to Sarah's pack bond with a surge that stopped me mid-stride. It was like every dial being turned up at once. My senses extended outward. My strength deepened. Something that had been running at low power for 21 years found more power and didn't know what to do with it. Sarah slowed and ran beside me and said nothing. She let me work through it. After the run, she looked at me for a long time with her clear, assessing eyes. "We need to talk," she said, "about what you actually are." I stood in the morning light, with my lungs burning and something unnamed opening in my chest. "I'm listening," I said. Chapter 6. What She Is. Wren was Silver Creek's lorekeeper, a quiet woman of about 40 who kept an office full of stacked texts and smelled of old paper and something herbal I could never identify. She met me the following morning with tea and no small talk. "Have you ever heard the term Surge Omega?" she asked. "No, I expected that." She opened an old marked book and turned it toward me. The text was dense and archaic, but readable. Most packs stopped formally acknowledging the category 3 or 4 generations ago. The knowledge became selectively maintained. I looked at the page. At the words, "An omega whose presence within a pack bond does not add to the collective strength but multiplies it." "What does that mean?" I asked, though some part of me already understood. "It means your power, the specific quality of your wolf, isn't additive. Every wolf bonded to the same alpha as a Surge Omega runs faster, recovers faster, holds formation better, hits harder. You don't make yourself stronger. You make everyone around you stronger. Why would that be suppressed?" Ren's jaw tightened slightly. "Because a wolf who can make the whole pack stronger is threatening to an alpha who runs through individual dominance. If your people are strong because of you, someone the alpha hasn't claimed, someone who could amplify a rival pack just as easily, it's easier to call them weak before they ever discover what they are." I read the passage again, slowly. "How do you suppress it?" I asked. "The easiest way is to limit their access to a full pack bond. Keep their rank low, keep their training minimal. Make sure they believe the story you're telling about them before they have the tools to question it." She met my eyes. If a Surge Omega grows up being told she's unremarkable, her power never fully develops. She lives her whole life at a fraction of what she is. I thought about 4 bonfire ceremonies, about being shuffled into supporting roles in every pack exercise, about a cold office and a blank-faced alpha saying, "I have not seen evidence of strength in you." I thought about Reuben, old Reuben, who had performed Ironwood's rituals for 40 years, and the guilt I had seen in his face at the ceremony, and had been too stunned to examine. "Did Kale know?" I asked. "I don't know," Ren said carefully. "The knowledge would have needed to come from someone with access to the older records. An elder, most likely. Reuben, possibly." I sat with that, with the full shape of what might have been done, not through cruelty exactly, but through something arguably worse. Through deliberate strategy. Through looking at a person and deciding she was more useful as something small. "What happens," I said slowly, "when a Surge Omega's power fully develops?" Ren looked at me for a long moment. "The texts are incomplete, but the pattern is consistent." She turned to another page. "She becomes something the pack structures were never quite designed to contain. Something settled in me, not grief, not anger, but something beneath both, something older and larger and very much awake. Show me everything you have," I said. Test line Chapter 7, The First Full Shift. The deep run began before sunrise. Ren led, Sarah ran flank. I was between them, and the moment we shifted and moved as wolves through the old-growth forest east of the compound, I understood what we were doing and why. My wolf had always been quiet. I had told myself this was temperament, simply who I was, a low-frequency wolf, steady and unobtrusive. What I had not understood until the moment I ran inside Silver Creek's full pack bond was that I had been running in a cage made of someone else's expectations for my entire life. The difference was physical. I felt it in my hindquarters first, a surge of force that was something older and deeper running along my spine like electricity. like I had been operating at quarter power and someone had found the other 3/4 and handed them back to me all at once. My stride lengthened, my senses expanded, not the ordinary radius of wolf hearing and scent, but wider, deeper, the way a signal clarifies when you find the right frequency. I ran past Ren. I kept running. I ran the way I had never run, without the ceiling, without the invisible pressure of a pack structure that had always subtly, silently defined my limits. I ran until I reached the far ridge, and the valley opened below me, and the sun came over the mountain in a sheet of gold light, and I stopped. I was shaking, not from fear, from something much larger and harder to name. I was 21 years old, and I had spent my entire life being told, directly and otherwise, that I was unremarkable. I had believed it because I had nothing to compare it to. Now I had something to compare it to. Ren reached me 30 seconds later, shifted back to human, and sat beside me on the ridge. Sarah patrolled behind us, giving space. He knew, I said. My voice was unsteady. Someone in Ironwood knew what I was. I believe so, Ren said quietly. And they told me I was weak. They told the story that served them. Below us, Silver Creek was waking up. Smoke from chimneys, movement in the training yard. I watched it and thought about Mara's letter, about the pack faltering, about Kale not sleeping. A Surge Omega's refused mate bond affects both parties. I was gone, my amplification gone with me, and the pack was feeling it whether anyone admitted it or not. I thought about Reuben, about his guilty eyes at 4 bonfire ceremonies. What I knew, someone had suppressed my nature, deliberately, for years. What I felt, a clean, clarifying anger, burning away the grief and leaving something harder and brighter in its place. What I decided, I was going to finish becoming what I was. I was going to walk into the inter-territory tournament on Ironwood ground and do it at my full height. Ren, I said, tell me everything the texts say about what a Surge Omega can do at full strength. She looked at me for a long moment, then she began. Chapter 8, Letters from Home. Mara wrote on paper. In an era when everything was typed and transmitted, my sister hand-wrote her letters in the looping script she'd developed in middle school and never grown out of. She sent them to Silver Creek, and I read them on the back steps in the evenings when training was done. The first 3 were love and worry in equal measure. Are you eating? Are you safe? Are you sleeping? Dom sends his love. The 4th letter was different. Alara, she wrote, and I could hear the careful control in the smaller-than-usual handwriting. Something is wrong here. I don't know how to say this, so I'm just going to say it. Kale hasn't been right since you left. Not in an obvious way, but the pack feels it. That low-level wrongness that happens when something is off in the alpha bond. Dom felt it first and thought it was his imagination. Now everybody is feeling it. The pack bond is weaker than it should be. We've had 3 training sessions where people broke down mid-drill for no reason. Corin told Dom she hasn't seen him sleep in a fortnight. I read that paragraph 3 times. I'm not telling you this because I think you should come back, she continued. I want that completely clear. I'm telling you because you have a right to know. Whatever is happening here, you don't owe anyone anything. You know that, right? You never did. I put the letter down and looked at the tree line, the pack bond weakening, an alpha not sleeping. 3 weeks after a mate bond was publicly refused, I knew, in the cold clinical way that Ren's research had given me, that a refused mate bond doesn't only affect the one who was refused. It affects both parties. And for a Surge Omega, the effect would be compounded, because I wasn't just his fated mate. I was the specific kind of wolf whose presence amplified everyone around her. Without me, the pack ran at diminished capacity, whether anyone admitted it or not. The pack was suffering. That was not my problem. I had not caused it. I had not asked for any of it. And yet, Mara and Dom and old Reuben, and even the people who'd given me pitying looks at bonfire ceremonies, they hadn't designed the cage. They just lived in it. I picked up a pen. "Mara," I wrote, "thank you for telling me. I'm not coming back. But I'm not done, either. I'll explain when I understand it better myself." I sealed the envelope. In 6 weeks there was a tournament, on ironwood ground. Whatever it meant and whatever came after it, I was going to be there. Chapter 9. The Tournament Announcement. The announcement came at Saturday's pack meeting. "The Interterritory Wolf Tournament is in 6 weeks, Sarah said, standing in the crowded common room without a podium, just present among her people, speaking clearly enough to be heard at the back. "We've competed every year for 15 years. Last year we placed second. This year I want first." The energy in the room shifted. That particular charge that runs through a wolf pack when the alpha says something that matters. The tournament was a regional tradition, demanding, multi-event, testing individual skills, pack coordination, territory instinct, and adaptive response. Teams of 12 from packs across 3 territories. The host rotated annually. This year's host was Ironwood. I stood very still when I heard the name. Damon, near my left shoulder, said quietly, "Noted." I kept my face still. After the meeting, Jess found me with the unerring instinct of someone who has identified something interesting. "You're going to try out," she said. "I haven't decided. You absolutely are. Pike has been watching you for 6 weeks, and she looks at you the way she looks at people she's already planning to field." Jess slung her arm around my shoulders. "And I don't know what happened in Ironwood, but you've got the face of someone with unfinished business. So you're going to try out, and you're going to make the team, and we're going to go to Ironwood, and you're going to show whoever needs showing. It's not about showing anyone anything," I said. "Sure," she said pleasantly. "Totally." Pike ran me through a solo evaluation that afternoon. 3 hours of endurance, response time, tactical decision-making in simulated scenarios, wolf form speed and agility. At the end of it, I was genuinely exhausted, which had become difficult to achieve lately. "You'll be on the team," Pike said. "You haven't evaluated the others yet. I've been evaluating everybody for 6 weeks. You'll be on the team." She handed me a water bottle. "The Ironwood hosts. Is that a problem? Not if I remember that the goal is to represent Silver Creek, not settle personal scores." "Good." A pause. "Also, your left side telegraph is gone entirely. Is that a compliment?" "It's a fact," she said. "Coincidentally, I like this fact." I walked back to the pack quarters in the late afternoon light and sat on my bed and looked at my hands. 6 weeks ago, I had run out of ironwood with 1 bag and a photograph. Now I was on a tournament team, representing a pack that had given me more in 6 weeks than my birth pack had given me in a lifetime. Something was coming. I intended to meet it standing. Chapter 10. Kale returns. He appeared at Silver Creek on a Tuesday afternoon, 6 days before the tournament. I was in the middle of formation drills when Damon arrived at the training ground edge, with his arms crossed and his particular expression, not alarm, but heightened attention. "You should know," he said, when I broke from the drill, "that there's an Ironwood delegation at the main gate, requesting a meeting with Sarah, the Alpha included." I went very still. "How many?" 4. Kale Stormwood personally. The sparring circle went quiet. Jess had stopped moving. Pike stood at the equipment rack with her shoulders squared. Sarah called me to her office 20 minutes later. She sat behind her desk with the stillness she adopted when things required precision. "Cale Stormwood is at my gate," she said. "He's requesting to speak with a member of my pack by name." My name, unspoken, sat in the room like a third presence. "What does he want?" I asked. "He hasn't said, but I want you to know 3 things before you decide anything." She held up one finger. 1. You are under Silver Creek's protection. No meeting happens without your consent. Second finger. 2. You owe Ironwood nothing. Not explanation, not audience, not courtesy beyond what you choose to give. Third finger. 3. If you want to meet him, I'll be present. I almost refused. I almost said no, absolutely not. Send him back across the border. But there was the bond, throbbing faintly like an old bruise. And there was Mara's letter, and there was the specific quality of unfinished business that I had been telling myself wasn't there. "I'll meet him," I said, "with you present." "Good," Sarah said, and stood. Let's find out what he came to say. He was standing in the meeting room when we arrived, not sitting, because Cale Stormwood didn't sit in rooms he didn't own. He looked exactly the same as always, which was its own small betrayal, because he should have looked worse. He had refused his fated mate, and wasn't sleeping, and his pack bond was faltering. There were shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there before. His gaze found me immediately, and stayed. "Alara," he said, then stopped, like he'd planned something to say, and found all of it wrong the moment I was actually in the room. I sat across the table from him, with my hands flat on the surface in front of me, and my wolf very carefully, deliberately silent. "Alpha Stormwood," I said, "you've come a long way. I'd like to know why. Enjoying the story so far? Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let us know your thoughts in the comments." Chapter 11. Fury and Fire. He said, "I need you to come home." The room went very quiet. Sarah, sitting to my right, said nothing. Her expression was the particular stillness of someone choosing to observe rather than intervene. I looked at Cale across the table and I said, "No." Something moved across his face. "Alara, no." My voice was steady and flat and entirely mine. "You don't get to say that to me. You stood in front of our entire pack and told me I wasn't strong enough to stand beside you. You dismissed a fated bond in front of everyone I've ever known, and you used the word clarity like it was a kindness. And now you've come to Silver Creek, neutral territory, a pack I've given my trial oath to tell me you need me to come home." I paused. The answer is no, and the tone of my no is the only tone available to you right now. His jaw was tight. "The pack is... I know what the pack is. My sister writes me letters." I looked at him steadily. "That is not my problem to solve. You're the reason. I'm not." The word came out sharp and clean. I did not refuse the bond. I did not make that decision for either of us. If Ironwood is suffering because its alpha chose strategy over fate, that is a consequence of the alpha's choice. Not mine. Cale was quiet for a long moment. His hands were clasped on the table in front of him, the same posture he'd used in his office 3 months ago, the controlled stillness of a man who had taught himself not to show things, except his eyes. His eyes showed things, if you knew where to look. I had spent 21 years watching Cale Stormwood from the distance of someone who knew she wasn't supposed to look directly. I knew where to look. What I saw there was not the cold certainty of the man who had dismissed me. It was something that cost him more than certainty. Something that looked, for just a moment, like genuine reckoning. "I was wrong," he said. The words fell into the silence like stones. "About what?" I asked carefully. "About what you are." He held my gaze. "Reuben told me things after you left, about what the bond evidence suggested, about what suppressing that bond might cost." "After I left," I said. "Yes, not before." A pause. "No. So you had information I was something other than what you'd decided I was, and you made a public decision based on the version of me you'd chosen to accept, and then after the consequences started landing, someone told you the truth." I kept my voice even. "And now you've come here. I've come to make it right." "You can't," I said simply. "What you did in front of that pack cannot be made right by a conversation in a meeting room. The damage of a public rejection isn't repaired by a private admission." I stood. "I'm going to compete in the tournament in 6 days. I'll be on Ironwood ground, and I will conduct myself as Silver Creek's representative. That's all I have to offer you right now." I walked out. In the hallway, out of sight, I stood against the wall and breathed. My hands shook for exactly 30 seconds. Then they stopped. Chapter 12. The Challenge. He didn't leave. This was what I hadn't accounted for. Cale Stormwood, having decided to do a thing, does it completely. He requested guest status at Silver Creek for the 6 days until the tournament, and Sarah, with an expression suggesting she found the entire situation professionally interesting, granted it. Jess appeared at my door that evening with 2 cups of tea and an expression of genuine entertainment. "Your Ironwood Alpha is in guest quarters," she said. "He accepted the room that shares a wall with the training yard. He's not my Ironwood Alpha. He's something," she said, settling on my desk. "Damon says he challenged no one, accepted all of Sarah's terms, and asked specifically not to be given preferential treatment. The next 6 days were a particular kind of strange. Tournament preparation was intense enough that I had legitimate reasons to be occupied at all hours, which I used without shame. But Silver Creek isn't large enough to avoid someone entirely, and Cale seemed, maddeningly, to understand this and make himself peripherally present without pressing. He attended training observation sessions. He helped haul equipment when preparation required extra hands. He ate in the common hall at the end of the table, speaking when spoken to. The pack watched him with curiosity and varying suspicion. Jess was openly entertained. Damon was thoughtful. Pike said nothing, but started scheduling my most impressive training blocks during the hours he was likeliest to observe. On the 4th day, I came to the equipment shed at dawn to find him already there, running rope drills. He was half-lit by the early gray light, moving through the sequence with the automatic precision of long practice. He stopped when I came in. I went to my equipment and began my own preparations without speaking. After a moment he said, "You're faster than you were." "Yes. Your positioning has improved. The left side telegraph is gone entirely." I glanced at him. "You noticed the telegraph. I've watched you move since you were 17. The words came out very quietly, like he hadn't fully intended to say them. I went still. "That's not something I knew," I said. "No." A pause. "There are things I should have told you, or things I should have found out, rather than accepting the shape of the story I'd been given. Cale." I turned to face him. "I understand you've received new information, and you're trying to recalibrate. That might be genuine, but I'm not available to process your recalibration right now. I have a tournament in 2 days. I have a pack to represent. Whatever you're working through, you work through it. If we're still having this conversation in a few weeks, we have it then." He looked at me for a long moment, then, "You're right." I picked up my equipment and left. I made it 40 feet down the path before I stopped, stood in the cold morning air, and pressed my fist against my sternum where the bond ached. 2 more days. Chapter 13. Secrets of the Mark. Ren found me that same evening. She came to the training yard at dusk and sat beside me on the low wall with a book under her arm and the expression of someone who has found something significant and is choosing their moment carefully. "I've been doing more research," she said. "Tell me." She opened the book, a different one than before, even older, the binding cracked and the pages brown at the edges. "I've been looking at historical records of Surge Omega mate bonds specifically, the specific bond between a Surge Omega and a fated Alpha, and it's not just an amplification bond. A Surge Omega who is fully bonded to a fated Alpha mate doesn't just make the pack stronger. The bond itself becomes a kind of anchor, stabilizing the Alpha's power, stabilizing the pack's territorial claim, acting as a check on the Alpha's worst impulses." She paused. "It's why the old packs valued them, not as subordinates, as partners." I looked at the page she opened to, at an old illustration, crude and worn, of 2 wolves, one with a marking on its flank that looked like spreading silver light. "The mark," I said. "The mate mark. In a completed Surge Omega bond, it manifests visibly, on both partners. Old records call it the silver wake." She turned the page. "Refused bonds produce what the texts call a wound. The pack instability your sister described is consistent with what a refused silver wake bond produces in the Alpha." I sat with this for a moment. "So when Kale refused the bond," I said slowly, "he wasn't just refusing a mate. He was refusing an anchor, something his power actually needs, something his power was built to need," Ren said quietly. "Whether someone told him that, I don't know, but the consequence is the same, and my power continues to develop whether the bond is completed or not. You're activating through Silver Creek's pack bond. It's slower than a completed mate bond would be, but it's real." She met my eyes. "Ilara, in 3 months you've gone from a wolf who didn't know what she was to a wolf who is visibly amplifying her training partners. Pike has noticed. Damon has noticed. Sarah noticed it the first week. Why didn't Sarah tell me? Because she wanted you to find it yourself. In her experience, people who are told what they are don't believe it as deeply as people who discover it." I looked out at the darkening training yard. The tournament was tomorrow. Kale would be there, and when I ran in Silver Creek's pack bond on Ironwood ground with everything I'd developed in 3 months, the whole territory would feel it, including every wolf who was present at that ceremony. "Good," I said quietly. And Chapter 14. Old Wounds. He came to find me that night. I was in the common hall, running through my tournament prep notes by lamplight, when his shadow fell across the table. I didn't look up immediately. I let him stand there for a moment, because I wasn't going to perform urgency I didn't feel. Then I looked up. Kale stood with his hands at his sides, and his expression stripped down to something I had never seen on his face before. Not his formal alpha blankness, not the controlled composure of the meeting room, but something raw-edged and carefully held, like a man carrying something heavy that he's been carrying for a very long time. "I need to tell you something," he said. "Before the tournament, before we're on Ironwood ground and everything becomes political again." "Sit down," I said. He sat. "There's a prophecy," he said. "That's not the right word. It's an old territorial divination that Reuben's predecessor performed a generation ago. About the alpha of the Stormwood line and a fated mate bond. He paused. The reading said that the alpha who completed a fated bond would see the pack's power transferred into the mate, that the alpha would become subordinate to the bond, would lose his ability to lead independently. He met my eyes. I was told this when I was 19. Reuben told me. He told me it was why the Stormwood line had always chosen strategic partners over fated mates. Why my father had. Why I should. I looked at him. You believed this, I said. I believed it. I had no reason not to. It was presented as recorded fact. He looked down at his hands, and at the ceremony, when I felt the calling, when I felt how strong it was, I was afraid. Not of you, of what Reuben's reading said the bond would cost me. And after I left, Reuben came to me. Cale's jaw tightened. He told me the full text of the reading, which he had never given me before. He looked up. The reading doesn't say what he told me it says. It says that the alpha who completes a fated bond with a surge omega will have his power stabilized and amplified, not transferred, not diminished. Made whole. The room was very quiet. Why? I said. Why would he do that? I don't know. I've asked him. He won't answer clearly. Cale's voice was even, but there was something underneath it, not quite anger. Something that had been anger long enough to turn into something heavier. Whatever his reasons, the effect was that I stood in front of our pack and refused a bond that I would not have refused if I'd known the truth. And I said things to you that I cannot take back. I looked at him for a long time. I believed him. I didn't want to, particularly. But I was a good reader of people, and what I saw on his face was genuine. The particular devastation of a person who has caused real harm while believing they were being responsible. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because you deserve to know, he said simply. Before tomorrow, before any decision you make. I nodded once. Thank you, I said. Then, I'm going to get some sleep. The tournament starts at 7. He stood. Elara, I heard you, I said. I need time to think about what I do with it. That's all. I went to my room and lay in the dark and thought about a 19-year-old alpha being handed a lie and trusting it because he had no reason not to. I thought about what it would have felt like to carry that story for 7 years. I thought about Reuben's guilty eyes at 4 bonfire ceremonies. I didn't know yet what I was going to do, but I was going to sleep first, and I was going to compete tomorrow, and I was going to do it at my full height. Everything else after that. Chapter 15. The tournament begins. The tournament grounds were on Ironwood's eastern meadow, expanded for the occasion with spectator spaces, event stations, and the central coordination pavilion where the hosting alpha held court. Cale held court beautifully. Of course he did. He moved through the arrival's greeting, the formal welcome address, the coordination meetings between pack representatives with the ease of someone who had been trained for this from birth. I watched him from the Silver Creek area and felt the bond doing its low, consistent ache, and told it firmly to be quiet. We were in 6 events over 2 days. I was slated for the individual speed and agility trials, the pack formation challenge, and the adaptive response scenario. Jess was in 3 events with me. Damon ran pack coordination from the sidelines. Silver Creek went into the first day in 3rd place after the morning events. By afternoon, we were 2nd. I noticed the moment it happened, not our score changing. That was noted and tallied. I noticed it as a physical fact in the air of the tournament grounds. The other pack representatives registering that Silver Creek was performing beyond its expected level. I was the unexpected factor. I knew it because Pike had told me before we left. Quietly and without ceremony. You run at the front, and everyone behind you will run better than they know how to run. Don't waste it. I didn't waste it. Kale watched from the hosting alpha's position. I felt his attention the way I felt the bond. Not painfully, not urgently, but with the specific awareness of something that exists whether or not you're looking at it. In the late afternoon, between events, I was stretching near the edge of the competition area when Mara appeared, my sister, in the flesh, cutting across the ground toward me with purpose, Dom following behind her. I stood up, she walked into my arms, and held on, and I held on back, and for a moment, the tournament and the bond and everything Kale had told me the night before went somewhere else, and there was just my sister, who had written me letters on paper and told me the truth when she could have protected herself from my reaction to it. You look different, she said, pulling back. I am different, better different. She was crying a little. Elara, you look like yourself. I don't think I'd seen you look like yourself before. I didn't know what to say to that. He told you, she said. Not a question. Yes. About Reuben. Yes. She nodded. Her eyes were complicated. I don't know what to think about Reuben. I've known him my whole life. I know. But I know what I think about you. And I think you should make whatever choice is right for you. Not for the pack. Not for the bond, not for anyone else. I looked at her. That's the most radical thing you've ever said to me, I said. She smiled. I've been practicing. Chapter 16. Fighting Side by Side. The adaptive response scenario was the final event of the tournament. In this challenge, participants were paired with members of other packs, random assignment, and given an objective they'd never seen before, with a partner they hadn't worked with before, in terrain they hadn't mapped. Designed specifically to test the real-time cooperative instinct that couldn't be drilled because you could never drill for the specific unknown. My assigned partner was Kale Stormwood. The assignment officer read the names without particular expression. I looked at the slip for a long moment. Beside me, Jess made a very quiet sound that might have been a laugh very quickly suppressed. Well, Damon said, to nobody in particular. Kale was already walking toward the staging area. I walked to meet him. I assume you didn't arrange this, I said. The assignments are randomized by an outside party. I had no input. All right. I picked up my equipment pack. Then we work with it. What are you good at? He looked at me. The question seemed to genuinely surprise him, like someone asking the alpha what he was good at was not a thing that had happened before. Territory navigation, he said. Response under pressure. I read defensive formations accurately. I'm fast, and I read my partner's position without being told. I run better with someone beside me than ahead of me. I shouldered the pack. I'll take flank, you take lead. If I see something you don't, I'll signal left ear twice. Don't argue with the signal. You think I'll argue. I think you're used to being the person whose judgment is deferred to. I'm letting you know in advance that in this event, we're equal. If you can work with that, we'll do well. He was quiet for a moment. Then, I can work with that. The objective was retrieval and extraction, a simulated wounded pack member in a complex obstacle course with active opposition. Time and precision both counted. The course changed behind you as you moved through it. We were excellent together. I want to be clear-eyed about that because I didn't want it to be true, but it was actually true. Kale read the terrain the way the texts described alphas at their best. Holistically, several moves ahead, with the certainty of a lifetime of being responsible for other wolves in real conditions, and he listened to my signals. Every single one of them, without hesitation, without the fractional delay of an ego consulting itself. We completed the objective in the top time of the day. Standing at the extraction point, breathing hard, I looked at him. "That was well done," I said. "You move like the whole course is a chessboard you've already mapped," he said. "I've never seen anything like it." "You've never competed with a 𝑷𝒍𝒂𝒚𝒍𝒊𝒔𝒕 before," I said. "No," he agreed. "I haven't." The silence between us was different from any silence we'd shared before. Not the cold silence of his office, not the fraught silence of the meeting room. This was the silence of two people who had just done something difficult together, and done it well. It was not a comfortable silence, but it was an honest one. Chapter 17. Silver Creek wins. Silver Creek won the tournament by 11 points, which sounds small, and was the largest margin of victory in the event's 15-year history. When the final scores were announced, and Sarah stood at the podium to receive the hosting alpha's formal acknowledgement, which meant standing in front of Kale, who gave it with composure I had to admire, the Silver Creek wolves erupted in the particular contained joy of a pack that has been working towards something and finally arrived. I stood in the middle of it and felt it, the pack joy, the bond warmth, the pride of something shared. Jess was crying and claiming she wasn't. Damon smiled in his specific, small, warm, genuine way. Reuben found me at the edge of the celebration. He moved slowly, he always had, and came up beside me and stood there for a moment before he spoke. He was 73 years old and had the face of a man who had been carrying something for a long time. "You've become remarkable," he said. "I was always remarkable," I said. "You knew that." He closed his eyes briefly. "Yes." "Why?" I asked. The simple answer. "Why?" "It's not simple," he said. "Make it simple." He was quiet. Ironwood had a succession crisis 30 years ago. The alpha before Kale's father bonded with a 𝑷𝒍𝒂𝒚𝒍𝒊𝒔𝒕, and the bond destabilized the pack. Not because of any prophecy, because he couldn't handle the shift in power balance. He tried to control what couldn't be controlled, and the pack fractured. He paused. I watched it happen. I watched what it cost. And when Kale was born with the Stormwood Alpha mark, I made a decision that I would protect the pack from that happening again. The prophecy was a framework I could use. The truth was more complicated than a young alpha could hold. I listened to this. I heard the logic of it, the terrible, well-intentioned, profoundly wrong logic of a man who had decided he knew better than the people around him what they could handle. "You cost me 21 years, I said, "of knowing what I was." "I know," he said. "And you cost Kale 7 years of operating on a lie. I know that too." I looked at him, the old man I had known since I was born, who had smiled at me with guilty eyes at 4 bonfire ceremonies. "You need to tell him everything," I said. "All of it. The full reading, the full context, the succession crisis. Not because it excuses what either of you did, but because he needs to be able to lead with the real information." Reuben nodded. "And then," I said, "I need you to stay out of my way." I walked back to the Silver Creek celebration, and I let myself be in it, fully, for the rest of the evening. Everything else after that. Chapter 18. Closer. We drove back to Silver Creek the next morning. The pack was in the high mood that follows a significant win, warm, the particular settled satisfaction of a group that has done something well together and knows it. Jess fell asleep against my shoulder in the back of the van, and I let her, and watched the mountains go past, and felt the bond with a different quality than I had in 3 months. Not aching, something else, something becoming harder to ignore. Kale had driven back to Ironwood with his delegation. He hadn't sought me out before leaving, which I appreciated. He had heard me when I said I needed time, and he was giving it, which was the right response. I found myself noting that with a precision I didn't particularly want to feel. I had a great deal to think about. I had the full picture now, the prophecy, the lie, the reason, the history. I had what Kale had told me and what Reuben had finally acknowledged, and I had the evidence of the tournament, the event where we had been put together by random chance and been extraordinary together. I had also, underneath all of that, the evidence of 4 months of Silver Creek, of who I was when I was given a fair chance, of what I'd become when someone looked at me and saw what was actually there. The question I was sitting with wasn't whether to forgive Kale. Forgiveness felt like the wrong frame, too binary, too much about emotional resolution rather than practical reality. The question I was sitting with was, what did I want? Not what the bond wanted, not what the pack needed, not what Mara hoped for. What did I, Alara Voss, 21 years old, want? I thought about the equipment shed at dawn and the way he'd said I've watched you move since you were 17 with the quality of an admission he hadn't planned to make. I thought about the adaptive response course and the way he'd taken every one of my signals without hesitation. I thought about his face when the formation results came in, not looking at the scoreboard, looking at me. I thought about what Ren had said. She becomes something the pack structures were never designed to contain. I thought about what I wanted the rest of my life to look like. I didn't have a complete answer, but I had the beginning of one, which felt like enough for now. When we got back to Silver Creek, Damon came to find me in the evening. He called. He said, "I know. My phone had shown the missed call. I'll call him back when I'm ready." Damon nodded. "For what it's worth, whatever you decide, Silver Creek is your home. That doesn't change." "I know," I said, and I meant it completely. Chapter 19. The Truth About the Prophecy. I spent a week at Silver Creek after the tournament, training and thinking in equal measure. Ren brought me the final piece of the puzzle on a rainy Wednesday afternoon. She came to my room with a printed translation, a full translation, not the excerpted version Reuben had kept, of the original divination text. I read it twice, then I set it down and looked at the rain on the window. The text was specific, in a way that the summary had not been. The old divination didn't just say that the bond would stabilize and amplify the Alpha's power. It described the nature of the Surge Omega bond in terms that made Reuben's omission, and the succession crisis he'd described, make a kind of terrible sense. The completed Silver Wake bond between a Surge Omega and her fated Alpha created a power structure that was genuinely equal. Not the Alpha with a supporting Omega, not an Omega made powerful by her Alpha's claim. Equal. The bond amplified both, required both, could not be dominated by either. What Reuben had watched the generation before, an Alpha who tried to maintain the old dominant structure inside a Silver Wake bond, who tried to keep his Surge Omega in a subordinate position and found that the bond wouldn't hold on those terms, who destabilized his own pack by trying to control what was designed to be a partnership. What Reuben had done in response removed the possibility entirely, kept the Stormwood Alphas from ever entering a bond they might handle the same wrong way, protected the pack from a crisis he'd seen before. What he had failed to account for, the possibility of an Alpha who could handle it differently, or the cost of a Surge Omega never knowing what she was. I folded the translation and put it in my jacket pocket and called Kale. He picked up on the second ring. "I've read the full divination text," I said. A pause. "Ren found it." "Yes." Another pause, longer. "What does it say?" "It says the bond makes us equal." That's why Reuben was afraid of it. Not because it diminishes you, because it requires you to share power with me, fully and genuinely, in a way that an alpha who runs through dominance alone cannot sustain. I paused. The question is whether you can do it differently than the alpha he watched fail. Silence on the line, long enough that I began to count seconds. Then, "I want to try," he said. His voice was quiet and certain, in the specific way it got when he had decided something. "I want to prove I can. I'm not asking you to believe that yet. I'm asking you to let me show you." I looked at the rain on the window. "Tell me what that would look like," I said, and he told me. Chapter 20. Jealousy. Kale called 3 more times over the following week. I called back on the 4th day, because making him wait past a certain point stopped being about needing time and started being about something less useful. I called from the back steps, in the evening, with the mountains turning purple in the distance. He picked up immediately. "I'm not calling to pressure you," he said, before I could speak. "I know," I said. "I just needed to know you were all right." "I'm all right." A pause. "Silver Creek treated you well. Silver Creek treated me well," I agreed. "Better than I'd been treated before." "I know," he said it quietly. "I've had a lot of time to think about that, about the way Ironwood's structure." He stopped, started again. "I don't have language yet for all of it. I'm working on it." "You don't have to explain yourself to me right now," I said. "I want to. I know you want to. But wanting to explain yourself and me being ready to receive the explanation aren't the same thing." I paused. "I'm thinking. I'll tell you when I'm done thinking." Another pause. Then something in his voice that might have been a small, reluctant smile. "You're significantly less deferential than you used to be." "Yes," I said. "I've been working on that." The thing I hadn't told Kale, the thing I hadn't told anyone, really, was that Damon had asked me to dinner. Not romantically, or not obviously. He had said dinner, just the 2 of us, that place in the valley you mentioned, and I had said yes because Damon was my friend, and I trusted him, and it sounded pleasant, and it had been pleasant. We had talked for 3 hours about everything except the obvious things, and I had walked back to the pack quarters feeling warm and settled in the way good company produces. But I had noticed, in myself, a very deliberate not analyzing of what it was or wasn't, and I had noticed that Kale, if he knew about it, would not like it. I was not doing it to make him not like it. I was being completely honest with myself about that. Damon was genuinely my friend and genuinely good company, and there was nothing calculated in it, but I was aware of the effect it would have. What I was not prepared for was finding out how aware Kale already was. He called 3 days after the dinner. Halfway through the conversation he said, very carefully and very controlled, "Damon Reyes is," and then stopped. "Damon Reyes is my friend," I said. "Yes," Kale said. "He is also someone who—" Another stop. "Kale," I said, "what are you trying to say?" A long pause. "I don't have the right to say anything." "I know that. But I am finding it extremely difficult," he said, in the specific tone of someone admitting something they'd prefer not to admit, "to have nothing to offer you, and to know that there is someone in your life who has something to offer you right now." I let the admission sit in the air for a moment. "Then you should probably think about what you're actually willing to offer," I said, "before we have that conversation." "I know," he said. "I'm working on it." Good, I said. Keep working. I hung up and sat very still. Somewhere in the past week, something had shifted, and I had not fully registered the shift until now. The bond was not aching. The bond was something else, something that felt less like an old wound and more like a door I had not yet opened. I was beginning to think I was ready to find out what was on the other side. Enjoying the story so far? Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Chapter 21. The Almost Kiss. He drove to Silver Creek on a Friday evening without calling first. I knew he was there before I heard the knock. The bond gave me that, a specific warmth in my chest that was different from the ache I'd been managing for 3 months. A warmth that said, he's close. He's here. I opened the door. He was standing in the fading light, with his hands in his jacket pockets and his expression carrying the particular tension of a man who has made a decision and hasn't yet committed to all its implications. I should have called, he said. Yes, I agreed. I didn't want to give you the chance to tell me not to come. A pause. That might have been selfish. It was absolutely selfish, I said. Do you want to come in? He came in. We sat across from each other in the small common area at the end of my hallway. Not my room, not close enough for any ambiguity about what the visit was. I brought tea because it gave my hands something to do. He wrapped both hands around the mug and looked at the steam rising off it for a long moment. I have been thinking, he said, about what I said at the ceremony, about strength. I know you have. I said I had not seen evidence of strength in you. He looked up. I want you to understand that I know, now, that statement was both factually wrong and a product of deliberate miseducation. You were the most consistently capable person in Ironwood for 21 years. You were simply not capable of the things I'd been told to look for, which were specifically designed to exclude what you actually were. I looked at him steadily. That is a very careful apology. It's not an apology, he said. I gave you the apology in the meeting room, and you told me it wasn't sufficient. This is evidence, the kind you respect, the specific, sourced, documented kind. He paused. I've been paying attention to what you actually respond to. Something shifted in my chest. Not the bond, something adjacent to it. Kale, I said. Yes. What are you doing here? He set down the mug, looked at me directly, with the full force of the gaze that had always been difficult to meet, and was, now, somehow more difficult than ever. I am here because I want to show you that I can choose differently than I did, he said. Not because the bond requires it. Not because the pack needs it. Because I understand now what I refused, and I would not refuse it again, and I want you to have the opportunity to decide whether or not you want to give me the chance to demonstrate that. The common area was very quiet. The bond was very loud. I need you to understand something, I said carefully. I am not the same person who stood at that bonfire. I am not going to be the person who is grateful to be wanted. I am not going to fold myself back into Ironwood's structure and be satisfied with whatever role is available to me there. If I come back, if I ever come back, it's as an equal. Full stop. No negotiation on that point. I know, he said, and I need to hear you say it clearly, not just accept it as a precondition. He held my gaze. I want your return as an equal. I need it as an equal. I have been working for the past month to restructure Ironwood's leadership framework to make that genuinely possible rather than just theoretically true. A pause. Corin has been very patient about it. I almost smiled. Almost. All right, I said. I need more time. I know. but I'm not asking you to leave Silver Creek tonight." He stayed. We talked until very late, not about the bond or the pack or any of the complicated weight of all of it. We talked about things we had never talked about, ordinary things, the particular conversation that happens when two people decide to begin knowing each other rather than circling each other. When he finally stood to go, he paused in the doorway. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For opening the door." He left. I stood in the hallway for a long moment, with the bond warm and steady in my chest, and I thought, yes, I think so too. Chapter 22. Betrayal. The attack came from inside. I was in the training yard on a Wednesday morning, 3 weeks after Kale's unannounced visit, and 2 weeks into a series of evening calls that had started as cautious and were becoming something else, when Damon found me with his face carrying an expression I had never seen on him before, carefully controlled fury. "Something happened last night," he said quietly. "You need to know about it before anyone else tells you." He sat me down in the empty equipment shed and told me. A member of Silver Creek's pack, a newer member, someone I'd been training beside for 2 months without particular notice, had been passing information. Not malicious, or not entirely. He'd been feeding pack movement information and scheduling to a rogue wolf faction that had been interested, specifically, in Surge Omegas. The information wasn't about the pack generally. It was about me specifically, my training schedule, my abilities, my general location. "How long?" I asked. "We think about a month. Has anyone come yet?" "Not yet. But Sarah believes they're planning something." Damon looked at me steadily. "The information suggests they want a Surge Omega for a specific purpose. There are factions that believe a Surge Omega's amplification ability, weaponized rather than bonded, could be used to dominate a territory." I sat with this. So, someone sold information about me to wolves who want to use me as a weapon, I said. Yes. I thought about the clean anger I'd found on the ridge, the morning I ran at full capacity for the first time. I thought about 21 years of being told I was unremarkable, and 3 months of discovering that was a lie, and now this, being remarkable for reasons that were still not about me, still about what I could provide to someone else. "Find them first," I said, "before they come here." Damon nodded. "Sarah's already on it. She reached out to Kale as well. Ironwood has contacts in the Rogue Wolf network." I looked at him. "She called Kale." "Yes, without asking me. She thought it was the tactical decision." "I'm inclined to agree." He paused. "Are you angry?" I thought about it honestly. "No," I said. "It was the tactical decision." A pause. "But I want to be in the room when the plan is made. I'll make sure of it," he said. Kale arrived the following morning, not with a delegation this time, alone, on the road at dawn, because Sarah had called him and he had come. I met him at the gate. We looked at each other in the cold morning light. The bond was steady and warm. The situation was dangerous and specific and required focus. "Tell me what you know," I said. He told me. Chapter 23. The Enemy. The rogue faction had a name, the Hollow Court. Not a pack in any legitimate sense, a collection of wolves who had been expelled from various territories for various reasons, organized around a single purpose, the acquisition of power that their own wolf strength hadn't been able to provide. They'd been building for years. A Surge Omega was, apparently, the final piece they believed they needed. Kale's contacts had confirmed 3 things. The Hollow Court had identified me before the tournament. They had been the ones who turned the Silver Creek informant, and they were currently positioned about 40 miles north of Silver Creek's border. How many? Sarah asked. We were in her office, Sarah, Kale, Damon, Pike, and me, around a table with a territory map spread across it. Our best count is 18, Kale said. That's not confirmed. Silver Creek has 32 active fighters, Pike said, plus 4 who are in recovery from recent injuries. She looked at the map. If they come at the border, we hold it comfortably. If they try to come through the southern pass, she traced a line. That's a harder approach, but it bypasses our primary defensive position. They know about the southern pass, Kale said quietly. The informant's data included patrol routes. The room was quiet. I had been looking at the map for 20 minutes, and what I was seeing was not just a tactical problem, it was a problem that had my name in the middle of it. 18 wolves who wanted to take me, not kill me, take me, and use my ability as a weapon for territorial domination. I thought about Reuben's fear, about the succession crisis 30 years ago, about the ways power, misunderstood and mishandled, could become a weapon even when it was designed to be a partnership. What the Hollow Court wanted was exactly what Reuben had feared a Surge Omega could become. Not an equal partner in a balanced bond, but an amplification engine under someone else's control. I was not going to be that. I want to run the Southern Pass Patrol myself, I said. Every head in the room turned toward me. Explain, Sarah said. If they come through the Southern Pass, they're coming for me specifically, which means I'm the bait either way. I'd rather be the bait on my own terms, in a position I've chosen, with a team I trust. I looked at Pike. If I'm at the Southern Pass with a 6-wolf team, and the bulk of Silver Creek holds the primary border, we divide their attention at minimum. If they come for me, we're ready. If they commit to the border, you handle it without me in your way. Pike looked at the map, looked at Kale, looked at me. The 6-wolf team at the Southern Pass, she said slowly. Who? Jess, I said. Damon. If Sarah can spare him. I looked at Kale. You know the Hollow Court's tactics better than anyone here. I'm not Silver Creek's to deploy, he said. No, I agreed, but you could volunteer. A pause that lasted exactly long enough. Then, I volunteer, he said. Chapter 24. Protecting Each Other. The Hollow Court came for the Southern Pass on a Thursday night, 48 hours after we'd positioned ourselves there. They came at midnight, the darkest hour, the traditional time for the kind of wolves who believed in traditional things. 18 of them confirmed, moving through the mountain scrub with the specific controlled aggression of a group that has trained together. They were competent. They were organized. They had clearly done this before. They had never done it against a Surge Omega who knew what she was. We heard them first, Kale and I simultaneously, which I didn't have time to find significant, noting the approach from the northeast quadrant, 12 minutes before the others picked up the scent. He looked at me, and I looked at him, and we didn't say a word, just moved. Him to the high position overlooking the pass, me to the center, where Jess and Damon were already repositioning based on our movement. The first wave hit the pass boundary at 12:17. What happened next I can only describe accurately by saying it was nothing like the controlled competence of the tournament course. It was fast and loud and deeply physical, and my wolf was fully engaged, all of it, every dial at maximum, and the team around me was running at a level I had never seen even in the best of our Silver Creek training sessions, because my presence was amplifying every wolf within 50 yards, and there were 6 of us and 18 of them, and the math should have been more frightening. It wasn't frightening. It was extraordinary. Kale fought like an alpha, with the specific quality of controlled force that comes from years of genuine authority, not dominance performance. He held the high position for 11 minutes against 3 hollow court wolves who were each trying to get past him to me, and he held it without asking for help. But when I sent Jess to his flank, he didn't argue or redirect her. He incorporated her immediately, and the 3 became 2. I held the center. A surge omega at full amplification in a genuine threat scenario is, I discovered that night, something that the hollow court had badly misjudged. They had wanted to capture me. What they encountered was someone who, in the heat of genuine necessity, made every wolf around her into something extraordinary. 12 minutes in, the hollow court's tactical leader called a retreat. They left 4 wolves injured on the pass. We lost nobody. 2 of our team had injuries that would need attention. One of those was Kale, a blade across his left arm, deep enough to matter, earned in the last minutes of the fight, when he'd interposed himself between me and a wolf I hadn't seen coming. I saw it happen. I had been half a second too slow. He caught my expression when the adrenaline dropped and said, "I'm all right." "You're not all right," I said. "You're bleeding. It's not serious." Kale. I was already moving toward him, because the alternative was standing here telling myself it was fine when it was not fine at all. "Sit down and let me look at it." He sat down, and I looked at the injury, and I pressed cloth against it with both hands, and neither of us said anything for a long moment. "Thank you," I said finally. "You would have caught it," he said. "Not in time." He didn't argue with that. Chapter 25. Confessions in the Dark. We got back to Silver Creek at 3 in the morning. Jess went to the infirmary for the cut on her shoulder and made it known that she was fine and would be telling this story at every available opportunity for the next decade. Damon went to give Sarah the full report. Pike materialized from somewhere and began the after-action debrief with the specific efficiency of someone who had been awake and waiting and had questions. I stayed with Kale while the pack medic, a composed woman named Fen, who had the steady hands of someone accustomed to receiving injured wolves at 3 in the morning, cleaned and dressed his arm. He watched me while this happened, not anxiously, not in pain exactly, though the injury was real enough. He watched me the way he'd looked at the scoreboard after the tournament, directly, openly, with the expression I was beginning to understand was what Kale Stormwood looked like when he wasn't performing anything. When Fen finished and left us in the quiet infirmary, he said, "You fought well tonight." "We fought well," I said. "Yes." A pause. "You trusted me." "I trusted your signals," I said. "You'd established you were trustworthy with signals." Something crossed his face that might have been a smile. "Is that how you're framing it?" "That's how I'm framing it right now, yes." The infirmary was quiet and cold and smelled of antiseptic and old wood. Outside, Silver Creek was doing what a pack does after a successful defensive action, processing, checking in with each other, the long decompression of wolves who've held their territory and know it. "Alara," he said. "Yes, I have been afraid," he said. "I want to be honest about that, because you've asked for honesty and I'm trying to give it. I was afraid at the ceremony, 7 years ago, the moment I felt the calling, because Ruben's story made it feel like the thing I'd been most afraid of since I was 19. I was afraid at my decision in the office, because it felt like the responsible choice, and I could not admit to myself that it was also the coward's choice. I was afraid at every point where I've driven to Silver Creek or called you since you left, because wanting something this much and being uncertain of whether I'd earned the right to have it is, apparently, deeply uncomfortable. I looked at him. And tonight, he said, when I saw you hold the center of that pass, in full amplification, with every wolf around you running at a level I have never seen, I was not afraid. I was... He stopped. I don't have the word. You were certain, I said softly. Yes, he said. That's the word. The bond was very warm. I reached out and covered his uninjured hand with mine. He turned his hand over and held mine back, carefully, like he was holding something he'd been afraid he'd never get to hold. We stayed like that for a long time. Chapter 26. The Mark Awakens. I noticed it the next morning. I was in the bathroom at dawn, splashing water on my face, trying to feel more like a person and less like a wolf who had run through a fight and then sat in an infirmary holding someone's hand until 4 a.m. And I looked in the mirror and stopped. On my left wrist, the inside, where the pulse is, there was a marking, not a bruise, not an injury from last night, something silver faint against my skin, like a watermark on paper, a spreading pattern that I recognized from Wren's old book illustrations, the silver wake, the mate mark, beginning. I stared at it for a long time. Then I put on my long-sleeved shirt and went to find Wren. She was in her office at that unreasonable hour, because Wren was always in her office at unreasonable hours. She took one look at my face and said, "Show me." I rolled up my sleeve. Wren sat back in her chair and looked at the mark for a long moment with the expression of someone who has theorized about something for months and is now confronted with the actual evidence. "When?" she asked. "I noticed it this morning. I don't know exactly when. Last night," she said. "During the fight or after it. Surge omega mate marks activate under genuine emotional intensity combined with physical proximity and full amplification." She looked up at me. "What happened last night?" I told her. "All of it. The fight, the blade, him interposing himself, the infirmary, the held hand." Wren was quiet for a moment. "And what does the mark mean for you?" she asked. "Not what the texts say. What does it mean for you?" I looked at the silver pattern on my wrist, at the beginning of the silver wake, forming whether I'd decided anything or not, because apparently some parts of this were not going to wait for me to finish thinking. "It means I need to have a conversation," I said. "Yes," she agreed. "I think you do." I found Cale in the guest quarters, dressed and ready to leave, which I had expected. He had a pack to run, and had already been here longer than planned. He looked up when I came in, and something in my expression stopped him from the polite departure words he'd been about to say. "Before you go," I said. I rolled up my sleeve. He looked at the mark, looked at my face, looked at the mark again. "When?" he said, quietly. "Last night, I think." I held his gaze. "I'm not telling you this as a decision. I'm telling you this because you deserve to know what's happening, the same way you told me what was happening on your side." I paused. "The bond is choosing for itself. I'm still choosing for myself. Those are two different things." "I know," he said. "Do you have a mark?" I asked. He pushed up his sleeve. On his left wrist, identical positioning, the same silver pattern, slightly further developed than mine. "How long?" I asked. "Since the morning after the tournament," he said quietly. I didn't know what it was. I had to look it up. I looked at his wrist, at the mark that had been forming since the morning after we'd competed together, the morning after the conversation in the dark in which he'd told me the truth about the prophecy. "All right," I said. "I'm going to need about 2 more weeks." He blinked. "Of what?" "Of knowing that you chose this when you had the option not to, Not 2 weeks of uncertainty, I know where this is going, but 2 weeks of you living with that, and me watching you live with it, and being certain that what I'm seeing is real. A pause. Then the fractional smile I was beginning to collect. 2 weeks, he said. Yes. All right, he said. 2 weeks. Chapter 27. Alliance. The 2-week mark fell on a Sunday. I drove to Ironwood. Not because the bond had made the decision for me. The bond had been making its decision for months, arguably since the ceremony, arguably since before that. But because I had made my own decision, which was that I wanted this, that I had spent 2 weeks watching Kale operate with a transparency and consistency I had not previously seen from him, and that I was done waiting. He met me at the Ironwood border, which I hadn't asked him to do, and which meant he'd been expecting me, or hoping for me, or, most likely, both. He was standing at the tree line in the late afternoon light, and when I pulled off the road and got out of my car, he walked toward me with that particular stride he had, controlled and unhurried, the gait of a man who knew where he was going. I met him halfway. "Hi," I said. "Hi," he said. We stood in the light that came through the tree canopy in late October pieces, dappled in gold, and looked at each other. "I've been restructuring the pack leadership framework," he said. "Not in theory, in practice. Quinn is now co-leading with equal authority on internal decisions. The Elder Council has been revised to include 3 positions that require non-alpha perspectives. The training program has been overhauled. No wolf in Ironwood will be tracked into a role based on rank category, without individual evaluation." He paused. "I can send you the documentation if you want the details." "I want the details," I said. "Later." "Later," he agreed. "I drove here," I said, "because I'm done waiting to say what I'm actually saying, which is that I'm not coming back to Ironwood as something I was before. I'm not coming back as the Omega who waited and hoped and was grateful for acknowledgement. If I come back as what I am." I held his gaze. "A Surge Omega. Your equal in every way that matters, full partner in the pack leadership. The Silver Wake bond completed on terms we both choose." I paused. "That's what I'm offering." He was very still. "And?" I said. "I know you have something to say back." "I have been waiting," he said quietly, "for approximately 3 months, to tell you that I'm sorry, not the careful kind of sorry I gave you in the meeting room, which was apology as information management. I'm sorry that I dismissed you. I'm sorry that I accepted a story about you that served my fears rather than the truth. I'm sorry that 21 years of who you actually are were wasted on a pack structure I participated in without questioning." He paused. "I'm sorry, and I would like the chance to spend a significant amount of time making sure that the pack you return to is one that deserves you." The trees were very still around us. The bond was, for the first time in 3 months, entirely quiet, not aching, not pushing, not the persistent low-frequency insistence of something refused. Just present, just warm, just waiting for me to say yes. "All right," I said. He reached out and took my hand, the left one, the one with the silver wake mark, and held it carefully, the way he'd held it in the infirmary. "All right," he said back. Chapter 28. The Bond Completes. The completion ritual was simple. Ren had told me it didn't require ceremony. The Silver Wake bond completed through choice, not through performance. What it required was 2 people who had made the same decision, in full knowledge of what the bond was and what it asked, choosing each other without reservation. We were in Ironwood, in the clearing behind the pack house, where the bonfire was lit on ceremony nights, where I had stood 4 times and felt nothing and then felt everything. The fire wasn't lit tonight. It was midday, autumn clear, the sky an unreasonable shade of blue, and the trees around the clearing red and gold, and already beginning to let go. Kale stood in the center of the clearing. I walked toward him. "Are you certain?" he asked, when I was close enough that the question was only for me. "Are you?" I asked back. "Yes." "Then I am." He reached for my hand. I gave it. The silver wake mark on my wrist was fully visible now, had been growing every day for the past 2 weeks, silver bright and spreading, and his matched it exactly, the same pattern on the same wrist. When our marked wrists touched, when his hand closed around mine and the marks aligned, the bond completed. It wasn't violent. It wasn't overwhelming. It was the specific feeling of something that had been slightly wrong for a very long time, suddenly going entirely right, like a note finding its key, like a door opening inward. The silver wake marks flared, both at once, his wrist and mine, silver white and bright as moonlight in the afternoon sun, and then settled into something permanent and warm, still visible, always visible, a physical mark of what we'd chosen. I felt the pack. Not just Silver Creek's bond, which I had been carrying for months. Ironwood's pack bond, the specific signature of 200 wolves and their alpha's particular quality of strength, opened to me like a new sense, and I felt what I was to it. Not weight added to a structure, something that changed the structure, made it broader and steadier and more resilient, the way the old texts described it, the way I was supposed to have been all along. I felt Kale feel it too, felt the bond relay his experience back to me, which was something I hadn't expected and hadn't been warned about. The silver wake bond was reciprocal. What he felt, I could feel. What I felt, he could feel. Not merging. We were still ourselves, fully, but connected at a depth that was both extraordinary and, I found, entirely natural. He was holding both my hands now. We were very close. "All right?" he said. "More than," I said. He pressed his forehead against mine, stood there. I let him. The clearing was very quiet. The sky overhead was the unreasonable autumn blue. Somewhere behind us, I was fairly sure I could hear Jess, who had driven to Ironwood with me under the stated premise of providing moral support and the actual premise of wanting to see this, trying to be quiet and not entirely managing it. "Your second is crying," Kale said. "She claims she doesn't cry," I said. "She's been crying since we walked into the clearing." "I know. We stayed where we were for a while longer." Chapter 29. Coming Home. I moved to Ironwood 2 weeks later. This was not a simple logistical process. I had 4 months of a life at Silver Creek, a training position, a trial period membership that Sarah formally converted to permanent status in the week before I left. "You've earned it," she said, "and you can keep it regardless of where you live." A room that had become mine, friends that had become real. Jess said goodbye by hitting me in the shoulder hard enough to stagger me, and then hugging me for approximately 3 minutes while claiming she was not hugging me. Damon said goodbye by saying, "I'm glad you came here," and then, after a pause, "I'm glad this is where you're going." Both were true, and he meant both. Sarah said goodbye in her office, standing, in the specific way that marked the end of a Sarah meeting, and I felt the weight of what she'd given me, not just shelter and training and a pack that saw clearly, but the specific gift of being given room to become the thing I hadn't known I was. "Thank you," I said, and meant it in all the ways I was capable of meaning things. "Don't thank me," she said. "You did the work." I drove to Ironwood with my one bag, somewhat more full than it had been when I left, because I had accumulated things in 4 months, the way people do when a place becomes real, and I arrived in the late afternoon, and Kale met me at the gate. Not alone, he had brought the pack. Not the whole pack. 200 wolves don't fit at a gate, even a large one, but the leadership circle, and then behind them a wider collection of pack members who had, apparently, decided they wanted to be present. It was not a ceremony. There was no formal welcome speech. They were just there, watching, some with curiosity, some with the specific reserve of people who are still adjusting to change, and some with an openness that I hadn't expected and that made my throat tighten in a way I had not anticipated. Corin stepped forward. She was Kale's second and had been for years, and her expression was the one I'd seen at the pack house the day I was summoned to the office. Careful, evaluating, but different now. The evaluation was different. "We don't know each other well," she said. "No," I agreed. "I'd like to change that." She held out her hand. I shook it. Her handshake was firm and direct and completely sincere. I walked into Ironwood for the first time in 4 months. Kale walked beside me, one hand at the small of my back. Not directing, not steering, just present. The pack bond of Ironwood opened around me the way it had in the clearing, warm and broad and mine as much as his, and I felt the amplification effect without trying for it, felt the pack's energy level lift slightly as I moved through it, felt my own wolf settle into a territory that was, now, genuinely and entirely my own. I was not the person who had run out of here in the dark 4 months ago. I was not the Omega who had believed the story they told her. I was Alara Voss, Surge Omega, Silver Wake Bond, and I had come home. Chapter 30. Acceptance. The first month was not without difficulty. I want to be honest about this, because the story of a returned mate and a restructured pack does not proceed without friction, just because it has a good foundation. Ironwood had 21 years of habits to unlearn, not malicious, not deliberate cruelty, but the deep grooves of a structure that had never been questioned because it had never been given reason to be. There were pack members who needed time to adjust to my presence as something other than an Omega in a support role. There were moments in council meetings when old instincts toward hierarchy surfaced and had to be named and addressed. There was the specific ongoing awkwardness of Reuben, who remained elder and who I had to learn to work with despite everything. Not forgiving him, exactly, but building a functional working relationship that acknowledged both the wrong done and the genuine knowledge he carried. Kale was consistent. That was what I noticed most. His consistency. When old habits surfaced in council, when someone deferred to him over me in a decision that was mine to make, he redirected without drama and without making it a larger moment than it needed to be. When I asked him to do things differently, he did them differently. When I told him something wasn't working, he worked on it. He was not perfect. Neither was I, but he was consistent, and so was I, and that, I was learning, was the actual substance of what the Silver Wake Bond asked. Corin became a genuine ally, which I had hoped for, but not assumed. She was rigorous and slightly terrifying, and had a dry humor that I appreciated, and she took the restructured leadership framework seriously in a way that made it actually function rather than theoretically exist. Jess visited twice in the first month, which was frankly more than I'd expected and exactly what I needed. Her specific brand of blunt, honest warmth in the middle of everything new. Mara cried when I called her on the first evening, which I had expected. Dom made a terrible joke about owing him money, which I had also expected. The pack adjusting around me was something I observed with the specific attention of someone who knows what suppression looks like and is watching for its absence instead. What I saw was not universal comfort. Change is never universally comfortable, but genuine effort. An honestly made attempt to restructure around a new reality. On the last evening of the first month, I sat on the back steps of the pack house. The big pack house, which was now also mine, which still required me to remind myself of that regularly, and looked out at the mountains, and felt the pack bond of ironwood spread out around me, warm and complicated and real. 200 wolves, and one very particular alpha, and all the messy necessary work of something genuinely new. Kale came and sat beside me without being asked, the way Damon used to do at Silver Creek. "How are you doing?" he asked. "Better than I expected," I said. It was more true this time than it had been the first time I'd said it. "Good." He was quiet for a moment. "The pack feels different, I know. Better," he said. "It feels better." I looked at the mountains. "It'll keep getting better," I said. "That's how this works." Enjoying the story so far? Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Chapter 31. A New Pack. The formal recognition ceremony happened on a Tuesday. Not because Tuesday was ceremonial, it wasn't, but the Elder Council had asked for a formal recognition of the pack's new structure, which included my role, which required a ceremony, and the date that worked for everyone's schedules was a Tuesday in November. Reuben officiated. This was complicated for both of us, and we both knew it, and we had a conversation about it beforehand that was difficult and specific, and concluded with both of us deciding that the right thing was the right thing, regardless of personal complexity. He stood in the clearing where I had stood 4 times before, and looked at me with eyes that were older and more weary than they had been even 3 months ago, and he said the words that made Ironwood formally what it was already becoming, a pack with equal co-leadership, Silver Wake bond acknowledged in the pack structure, a Surge Omega formally recognized as what she was. The pack stood in the clearing, and it was very quiet and very still. Then Corin, standing to my left, did something I hadn't expected. She howled. Not the formal ceremonial howl, the other kind, the full-throated, unreserved wolf howl that is the purest expression of pack bond acknowledgement, the kind you can't fake. The pack answered her. 200 wolves, and the sound of it went up through the trees and into the sky, and I felt it in the Silver Wake bond, in Kale's hand around mine, in my own chest where the ache had lived for 4 months and was now something else entirely. I had never heard Ironwood sound like this before. I had never been at Ironwood when Ironwood sounded like this before, which was not the same thing. The ceremony ended, and the pack dispersed, and I stood in the clearing for a little while afterward, with the cold November air and the specific silence that follows something significant. Kale stood beside me. "How does it feel?" he asked. "Strange," I said honestly. "Good strange, the kind of strange that might stop feeling strange eventually." "The pack sounds different," he said. "I know, stronger." A pause. "Not just tactically. It sounds lighter, like something that was being held under tension has been released." I thought about 21 years of a Surge Omega's full capacity being deliberately suppressed in this territory, about the specific weight of that, distributed invisibly across the whole pack bond for decades, about what it might feel like to have it released at once. "That's probably accurate," I said. He reached out and took my hand. The Silver Wake marks were warm and visible in the cold air. I'm glad you came back, he said. You came for me, I said. Eventually. I came for you eventually, he agreed. I should have come sooner. Yes, I said. But you came. We stood in the clearing where it had begun and where it was, now, beginning again, in the way that things begin when they're being built from better materials. Chapter 32, Rivals No More. The Silver Creek Alliance became official 3 months after my return. It had been in negotiation for longer. Sarah and Kale had been in contact since the tournament, since the Hollow Court attack, since the specific recognition that Silver Creek and Ironwood's territories shared a border that was better managed as an alliance than as neutral space. The formal signing happened on Silver Creek's territory, on Sarah's turf, which was the right thing, and Kale agreed with it readily, which said something about how much had changed. I sat beside Kale at the signing table, as his co-alpha, and signed my name beside his on the alliance document. Across the table, Damon sat beside Sarah, and I met his eyes and he gave me the small, warm smile that was his particular signature. We had talked before the ceremony, just the two of us, briefly, in the Silver Creek courtyard. You look settled, he said. I am settled, I said. Mostly. In progress settled, he nodded. How's the bond? Good. I turned my wrist over, the silver wake mark visible and constant. Really good. And him? I thought about how to answer that. Consistent, I said. That's the thing I didn't know to look for before. He's consistent in a way that I can actually trust. Damon considered this. That's the important thing, isn't it? Yes, I said. That's exactly the important thing. He looked at me for a moment with his steady, honest eyes. I'm glad, he said. That's genuinely all of it. I'm glad. I believed him. Damon Reyes was not a man who said things he didn't mean. The ceremony was brief and formal, and witnessed by both packs, and when it concluded, Sarah raised a glass of whatever the Wolf Territory equivalent of champagne was, and said, in the Sarah Cole way that was efficient and entirely warm, to what we're building. We drank. Afterward, Jess cornered me near the refreshment table and said, So, you're officially a co-alpha of the Ironwood Pack. You have a Silver Wake bond with the most intimidating man I have ever met. You're helping run an inter-territory alliance, and you've been back in Ironwood for 3 months. She looked at me. How are you actually doing? I thought about it. I thought about a girl who had stood at a bonfire 4 times and felt nothing and been told that was the full extent of what she was. I thought about running 6 hours in the dark. I thought about Silver Creek and what it had given me, and Kale and what we were building, and the silver wake mark on my wrist that was warm and real and mine. I'm good, I said, and it was the most completely true thing I had said in years. Chapter 33, Forever After. 6 months after my return, Ironwood had changed. Not completely. Change on the scale of 21 years of entrenched structure doesn't happen in 6 months. But enough that when I walked through the training yard in the morning, what I saw was different from the training yard I had grown up in. The ability tracks were no longer organized by rank category. The Elder Council met in a room with a round table. The pack's 3 Omegas who had been quietly shuffled into support roles were, now, in positions that matched their actual capabilities. One ran logistics. One was training with Pike toward the weapons track. One had been identified as carrying significant pack bond talents and was working with Ren. I had not done all of this. Kale had been doing this. Many of these changes had been underway before my return, which mattered. which was evidence of the specific thing I had told him I needed evidence of. I had accelerated some of it. I had named things that needed naming. We had argued about 3 things and reached genuine resolution on all 3, which was, I was learning what a real partnership looked like. The pack bond of ironwood felt different. Lighter was the word Kale had used, and I understood now what he meant. The specific weight of a 𝒍𝒂𝒚𝒍𝒊𝒔𝒕 suppressed capacity, lifted. The specific weight of a pack bond built around dominant structures rather than genuine strength, gradually releasing as those structures reformed. The pack was not just stronger, it was more itself, more capable of the things a wolf pack was supposed to be capable of. I ran the deep territory loop with Kale on Sunday mornings now. This had become a thing, not planned, not ceremonial, just a habit that had formed in the first month and continued because it was good. 6 miles through the forest east of the pack house, at full wolf speed, in the 𝒍𝒂𝒂𝒚𝒍𝒊𝒔𝒕 particular resonance. The territory was beautiful in the way territories are beautiful to the wolves who belong to them. Not scenic, exactly, but fundamentally right, the landscape that matched my wolf's internal geography. He ran beside me, not ahead of me, which was not a small thing, and he knew it, and I knew it, and neither of us needed to say it. On one of those Sunday runs, 5 months in, he stopped at the ridge overlooking the valley, the same ridge where I had stood with Wren the morning I first ran at full capacity, and looked out at the territory below us. I stopped beside him. "This is yours," he said, not possessively, factually, the way he stated things that were simply true. "Ours," I said. He looked at me. The silver wake mark on his wrist was visible even in wolf form, a faint silver shimmer in the fur, something the old texts had mentioned, but that I hadn't quite believed until I saw it. "Ours," he agreed. We ran back down the ridge together in the morning light, and the territory opened around us, and I was home. Chapter 34. Claimed. The second formal ceremony of my time at Ironwood was different from the first. The first had been about structure, the official recognition of the new pack framework, the formal acknowledgement of my role. It had been necessary and complicated, and Reuben officiated, and I'd been glad when it was done. This one was simpler. It happened on the night of the autumn equinox, which was deliberate. Kale had chosen the date, and I had approved it, because using the ceremony night for something real, rather than just the ritual that had preceded so many disappointments, felt right. Felt like reclaiming something. The whole pack gathered in the clearing. The fire was lit. The night was cold and clear, and the moon was the specific autumn full moon that I had stood under 4 times, and one extraordinary time. There was no formal speech. We had both agreed on no formal speech. What happened was this. Kale stood in the center of the clearing, and I stood beside him, and he turned to face me, and in front of every wolf in Ironwood he said, "Elara Voss, you are my fated mate. You are my equal in every way that matters to me. I claim the 𝒍𝒂𝒂𝒚𝒍𝒊𝒔𝒕 bond freely and completely. I claim you, not as a support or a supplement or a strategic advantage, but as my partner in everything I am and everything Ironwood is." He paused. "In front of this pack, I ask, do you accept?" The clearing was absolutely silent. I had written my own response and rehearsed it, and then, standing there in the firelight with the silver wake mark warm on my wrist and the pack bond of Ironwood humming around me, and Kale looking at me with his whole self entirely visible in a way it never used to be, I forgot every single word of it. So I said the true thing instead. "I ran out of this territory 4 months ago with 1 bag and a photograph," I said, "and I thought I was leaving because I had nothing here. What I found out was that I had nothing here because this place had never let me be what I actually am. I looked at him. You didn't build the structure that failed me, but you changed it. And that matters. I paused. I claim the silver wake bond freely and completely. I claim you. Yes. The silver wake marks on both our wrists flared silver white in the firelight. The pack erupted. Not the formal ceremonial response, not the polite acknowledgement of pack structure recognizing a change, the other kind. The full-throated, unreserved response of 200 wolves who had felt their pack bond deepen and strengthen and become more itself in the 6 months since I had come back, who knew in their blood and their bones what that meant, who were answering it. Jess's howl was immediately identifiable, loudest in the clearing. Kale reached out and covered my hand with his, the silver wake marks touching, warm and permanent and real. I was home, all the way home, in every sense. Chapter 35. Epilogue. 1 year later. 1 year after the ceremony at the bonfire, Ironwood was unrecognizable, or rather, it was recognizable in the way a thing that has finally become itself is recognizable. The bones were the same. The territory, the old pack house, the clearing with its fire circle, the mountain air that I had grown up breathing, the things that had always been real were still real. What had changed was everything that had been wrong, slowly and methodically replaced by things that were right. The training program graduated its first full class under the new individual assessment model. 3 of the new graduates were Omegas, who had previously been tracked into support positions. One of them was currently the fastest wolf in the territory, which Pike noted with her specific dry satisfaction. The alliance with Silver Creek had produced 3 joint territorial actions, 1 shared training program, and what Damon had started calling the most functional interpack relationship in regional history, which he said with the tone of someone who found this quietly hilarious and entirely correct. Reuben had retired from the elder position in the spring. It had been his own decision. His replacement was a woman named Cass, 40 years old, who had been Ironwood's most thorough archivist for the past decade, and who had, apparently, been quietly furious about the selective maintenance of pack knowledge for the better part of her career. She and Wren were already in correspondence. I ran the deep territory loop on Sunday mornings. Sometimes Kale ran with me, and sometimes Corin, and sometimes Jess when she visited, which she did with a regularity that had become its own kind of family. On the morning of the anniversary, I ran it alone. I ran the 6 miles through the forest, at full capacity, which was the only speed I ran anymore, the ceiling not just raised but gone, and I stopped at the ridge overlooking the valley that had been Sarah's and was now equally mine, and I looked out at the Ironwood territory spread below me. 200 wolves. A functioning equal leadership. A pack bond that hummed with the particular warmth and steadiness of something correctly built. A silver wake mark on my wrist, warm in the morning air. I thought about the girl who had stood at a bonfire 4 times and been told that what she felt, what she was, didn't matter. I thought about the night run to Silver Creek, 6 hours in the dark with nothing but a bag and a photograph, and the beginning of something I hadn't yet named. I thought about Damon's honest face, and Pike's precise corrections, and Jess's door-slamming laugh, and Sarah's clear, assessing eyes. I thought about what it had cost, and what it had taken, and what was now genuinely, completely real. The sun came over the mountain in a sheet of gold light, and I stood in it and breathed. Somewhere below me, the pack was waking up. Somewhere in the pack house, Kale was making coffee, and would be expecting me back in approximately 20 minutes. I ran down from the ridge into the morning, into the territory, into the life that was mine, all of it, now, mine. And that brings us to the end of this story. Thank you for listening all the way through. We hope this audiobook kept you entertained and left you wanting more. If you enjoyed it, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Let us know what kind of stories you'd like to hear next. There are plenty more full audiobooks waiting for you here, so be sure to check out the channel for your next great listen. Until next time, happy listening.